Well, hello there. It is February the 26th, and it's 6 o'clock Colorado time. And I'm here live in order to, it's a Saturday evening, and I'm here in order to just answer any questions that anybody may have sent in to me. You can reach me at aaron@aaronbudjen.net. That's my email that I use for this Q&A. And go ahead and send some in for me to look through and give some thought to. And I'll be back in 2 weeks in order to answer some more. So I have just a handful of questions to work off of this evening. Not a whole lot, which is fine. I'm kind of a little tired this evening anyway, so it's not such a big deal. But if you have something that you just want to try to throw in there before I'm done, then send me an email and I'll see what I can do. All right, so let's start with a question that I have about eating meat on or in the new earth. Will we eat meat in, and I believe this is going to be considered to be the millennial reign. Is there any meat eating going on there? Because there is the position that there will be no more death, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the order of things has passed away. Well, the first thing to look for is the sacrificial system, and it does not necessarily. I don't think it appears that there will be a sacrificial system at that time. If there was a sacrificial system, then the priesthood would be required to eat meat, and so that would be one way to determine that. Now, even though it's not mentioned, doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be such a thing, unless it explicitly says that there won't be. So that's a possibility. The thing that I personally am interested in, or that I would be interested in for this kind of a question, is there going to be the eating of meat in the millennium? The issue to me is the nutritional dynamics and the nutritional issues. There is an opinion, and I'm going to call it an opinion, that eating meat is not healthy, or that maybe eating certain kinds of meat is not healthy. With my studies of anatomy and physiology, there is a necessity. In my opinion, there is a necessity to be eating meat as part of obtaining the kind of nutrition that our physiology needs. And I am aware that there have been a lot of studies that have been done that have suggested that there are some non-meat alternatives that can give you the same nutrition. But those are not exhaustive studies. All right, there's a lot more to it than just can you find the right protein match and that sort of thing. I have known a lot of people. I am old, and I personally have known people who have taken the position that they are going to eat a healthy diet as would be defined by some health person or whatever, and they die pretty early. I've known people like that. Some people don't, of course, but there's someone who I can think of right now who decided to remove the overwhelming majority of meat from their diet, and they died before they were 60. And I don't think they had those. Well, they did not. They did not have those particular medical issues that eventually resulted in death before they changed the diet. They didn't have those problems, but they did have those problems afterwards. If you'll do a search and find out what is the average age of a medical doctor when they die, and I think it's somewhere around 56 years old. All right, and so these guys, they may be, there may be some. I think there are definitely some who really know what they're talking about and know what they're doing, but it appears that there are plenty of others who just don't. All right. So I would be interested in the nutritional requirements. And from what I can tell, I expect that I will have a different physiology during this time. I don't know what it will look like, but whatever it looks like, if my physiology is different, then fine. If there's no meat eating going on in the kingdom of heaven, in the millennial kingdom for 1,000 years or whatever, on the new earth, I'm perfectly fine with that. Just change my physiology first before you put that in place. That's what I would be thinking about. Something that I can mention about it in this day and age is that whenever it comes to the question of is something right or something wrong or is something good or something bad, I personally like to start with the Mosaic Law. And in the Mosaic Law, we have lots to go on. You have lots you can look up where God has said that there are meats that are fine to eat. Okay? If it has a split hoof and chews the cud, for example, then you can eat that. All right? Now, if God says that you can eat that, but you say that this is inappropriate or this upsets you in some way, then you should not be targeting or complaining to the people who are in compliance with the Mosaic Law. You should deal with this between you and God, all right, and see what He thinks about it. And from what I can tell, He says, yeah, you are to eat it. In fact, on the Passover, you are required to eat meat on the Passover lamb. And if you don't, then you are to be permanently cut off from your people, all right, from the people. Now, you also mentioned in here, I think, that in this question, that the thought of animals, cute, cuddly animals, being put to death and eaten upsets you and makes you cry. All right? That there will be no crying. Now, you have to be careful because this could be a potential opportunity for extortion. All right? It's the extortion. It could be. You have to be careful. It could be the extortion model where you say, now, God, there are some things that'll make me cry. And so don't ever let any of these kinds of things happen because I'll cry. And then we will have a violation in the new earth. In the millennial kingdom, we'll have a violation there, and you're responsible for that because I'm the one who has cried. All right. Now, you never know. I mean, he could be put in a corner. Whereas you might say, now, God, if you let somebody eat this cute little animal over here, then I'm going to cry. And the other person might say, now, God, if you don't let me eat this animal, then I'm going to cry. All right. I mean, somebody's going to cry. There's no way out of it. All right. There's no way. Somebody is going to be crying, and so you don't want to, you don't want to put God in a circumstance of extortion to say that there can be no crying. And don't worry. I am a sensitive person, and if anything makes me cry, then whatever it is definitely wrong, and I will have vengeance. I will. All right? You have to be careful of that. You just do. All right. It's hard to avoid, but I just wanted to caution you that might be a concern later on. It might be. All right. But of course, overall, I really don't know, and I really don't need to know. I mean, it's not that important to me. All I want to know is what is my physiology going to require to function to the maximum ability that it's able to function at that time, and I will eat anything that is necessary to make that work. But again, you got to be careful of these experts who claim that they have a alternative when it really isn't. Okay, Romans chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. Okay, now, yeah, this question here is a question that I cannot answer, but I'm bringing it up because I'm going to ask you folks not to ask me questions like this. All right, just to save us both some time, don't ask me questions like this, and I'll show you why in just a moment. All right, in Romans chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, it says, there is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has made me free from the law of sin and death. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God did by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh on account of sin. He condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteous requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. And of course, I have taught a lot on these passages. You can listen to those in the Living God Ministries radio archive in the verse-by-verse study that I did on the book of Romans, chapter 8. So I won't try to duplicate any of that content there. The question is this, though. What the law was powerless to do, it's about that part which is found in the beginning of verse 3, for what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God did by sending his own Son. The question is, if the flesh of ours would not be in the way, what would the law do? All right, again, the question is, if the flesh of ours would not be in the way, what would the law do? All right, now this question is, well, if this was different, then what would happen then? You know, if this was different, or if this was not the way it's described, if we had an alteration of some kind. All right, now this is a what if question. Okay, that's what it is, a what if question. Now, I don't mind some what if questions when it comes to other kinds of topics, but when it comes to the scriptures, don't ask me what if questions. Don't do that to me. All right, what if? Well, you know, maybe there is a what if, but that's not the way things are. And so I cannot take the time, the energy to get into a what if thing or a speculation kind of a question. I just can't do it. That is, I'm mentioning this for others, in the future. Don't send me what if questions or speculation kinds of questions. All right, please don't do that to me. It turns out that I really don't have much time. I just don't. I work hard. I work a lot, and I have other responsibilities as well. And especially, with the video and stuff, sure, I've got some donations that help me, buy the time for this, but I am way, way, way under what it really costs. And so I make up the difference by doing work somewhere else. So please don't send me speculation questions or what if questions, because I just can't get into it. I just can't do that. It sounds nice, and this could be an interesting thing to explore. It's not that I want to discourage you from doing it. Just don't involve me in this kind of stuff, because I just can't. I don't have the resources. I am on a clock every day, and I have to be productive. I really do. And unfortunately, dealing with speculation and what if kinds of stuff, I can't. I don't have the luxury in my life to be able to do that. If you do, good for you. That's nice. But unfortunately, I can't do that. Another kind of question that I get sometimes is, why didn't you talk about this? Like referring to some commentary about something from somebody else, or there's something interesting here that could be found in a verse-by-verse study or whatever. Don't ask me why I didn't talk about something, all right? The reason why I wouldn't talk about something, most likely, is because it's probably just not that important to me, so I'm not going to. But there's also the issue that I cannot take the time to do that much study and that much research to see what all the other stuff, has been said about this and that and every other commentary. Even if you send me books and you send me photographs of 3 or 4 pages and something, I'm not going to read it. I'm just not. I can't. it's a physical limitation. I don't have that much time on the clock, I mean, there's lots of other guys who can do that. There are full-time pastors, that they get a salary and a pension. I don't get that. I don't get anything like that at all. And this is what they do. Good for them. That's nice for them. But I don't have that. I don't. I would, it would be nice. But hey, send me a $20 donation now and then, and sometimes that gets quite depressing, all right? Because I can't do much with $20. It goes by real fast, It just goes. So, do me a favor, folks, all right? Try to, save the what if questions and the why didn't you questions for somebody else. There's other people who apparently have a great donation base and they can do that, but I can't. I have to do other things, all right? Okay, next one. This is a good one. Why did Jesus fold the linen burial cloth after his resurrection? Why he had this cloth over his face? Why did he fold it and put it aside? I never noticed this. The Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 7, tells us that the napkin, which was placed over the face of Jesus, was not just thrown aside like the grave clothes. The Bible takes an entire verse to tell us that the napkin was neatly folded and was placed separate from the grave clothes. Now, I would like to say that it might be interesting that you saw this, but I seriously kind of doubt it. I think that you got a hold of one of the rumors. All right, now, I remember when this rumor came out. Okay, and I wrote up an article on this, and I used to have it posted in a Q&A section on Living God Ministries website, but I took those down for some other reasons. I still probably have it in a directory somewhere. I could pull it out where I could reply to you with the full write-up. I thought about doing that, but I want you to know I deleted your email after I queued it in here because, well, again, it's a time issue. So if you really want it, then send it to me and I'll try. Okay, I don't know. It depends on what the demands are. It might sit in my inbox for a while. Okay. But I remember when this came out, and I went ahead and I did some research myself to just go and find out what are the rabbinical commentaries, during the time of Christ and shortly after. What does the literature say about the napkins, and about the napkin and about the burial clause and that kind of sense? And I did a search that was to my personal satisfaction. All right. I did. I feel it was relatively exhaustive. And this is my sincere opinion about this claim that the folding of the burial cloth has some significance, all right? My opinion is, from the work that I've done, is that it has absolutely no significance of any kind whatsoever, all right? Absolutely none. Sure, it's mentioned, and I think that's nice, okay? But this idea that it has some kind of special rabbinical or Jewish significance of some kind is just total absurdity. I'll tell you what it is. This is what it is, all right? What it is that this is something that was invented by some people who have this belief that unless you know about Jewish culture and unless you know about Jewish law and Jewish rituals and Jewish anything, all right, as long as you must know about all of these things, or you are not going to know the Lord like you ought to. And somebody just made this up. It was a total fabrication by some folks in order to try to elevate themselves and say, you see, here's an example of some special Jewish knowledge that needed to be discovered and known so it could be applied and so you can understand the scriptures and what they mean. All right, now listen, there can be a place for some of that. And if you go through the recordings that I've done in the first section of the Radio Archive of Living God Ministries, you'll find a lot of that stuff, all right? So I'm not saying that there's nothing, okay? But I am saying that this was way over the line, okay? Way over the line. This was a total lie. That's what it was. And there were people who are just, talking about this and preaching this, and following it up with, and buy my CD. I mean, that's what it is, okay? It's a total lie. There's nothing about that at all, anywhere in the rabbinical literature of any kind, okay? Nothing. It's a total fabrication. The closest that you're going to get to is the debate. I mean, this is the closest I got to, right? The debate between the household, between the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel. All right, there was a pretty big debate over the napkins. Do you have the napkin on the table, or do you have your napkin on your lap? Now I remember this one because this was a tough one. You got to reconcile the two. This was what they were needing to do during the time of Christ, was they had to say that, they didn't really disagree with each other. Not really. In the Mishnah, we have the description of the different positions about how you would handle your napkin. The Gemara is the commentary on how we reconcile any differences that might exist. And the answer was, just be careful with your napkin. All right. I remember that one because that's not a reconciliation. That doesn't say that both are going to work. You can't make them both work. All right. And so I found that interesting myself because you can't, they could not accomplish what they were setting out to accomplish with that kind of a conclusion. Just be careful. It doesn't work. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next one here. I have recently had a Muslim neighbor come to my shop, and we had a good 40-minute conversation about what we both believe in. Yes, Muslims will talk. Absolutely. Those of Islam. And, very few people know this, but I have actually had a lot of time. I've got a lot of experience with talking with members of Islam. I have. I've got a lot of experience. And I can tell you that when you find one who's interested in talking, they will talk and they will talk. But I want to remind you of something very important to keep in mind. And that is that they will normally talk a lot about those things that keep you away from those subjects that are actually important to them. All right? They'll talk about anything that's just not really that important to them anyway. And they'll keep the conversation going. And see, the way that they win in their minds, the way that they win the discussion is by keeping you from convincing them of something else because you get exhausted, you run out of time, that kind of a thing. All right. So, the character and the personality of a lot of members of Islam can be quite challenging. This was some of my early skill development of, if you cannot bridge the gap, make it as wide as possible, to make sure that there is an understanding. We just do not agree at all. We just don't. Okay. All right. So there were a few points that were confusing. He pointed out that he believes in a couple of things. And you brought up the subject of spiritual death, and that just as Adam sinned and Adam died, and all in Adam died, and he is dead. Now we have been born in this condition, being spiritually dead and in a condition of sin. And the response to this by the Muslim is that it's not acceptable for us to be responsible for Adam's sin. All right, we should not have to suffer for the sins of our fathers. Okay? And that's a good point. It is. It's a good point. I will tell you how you can respond to this. But again, be prepared. Even though you may give a really good response, it doesn't mean that they're going to believe. It doesn't mean they're going to concede, because to them, the objective was to have the argument. That was the objective. It doesn't matter what the conclusion is. The objective is to have the argument. So be careful not to think that if you find the answer, if you find the convincing explanation, well, then he's going to bend the knee and praise Jesus. No. All right, no. Doesn't work that way, all right? Okay, so this is how it can be addressed. The way that it can be addressed is that when Adam was created by God, he was created by God in a specific way. And God established a law saying that if he violated the law, things are going to be different. Okay, now when things became different, that was a change in the design. That was a change in everything. A whole change in the world. Okay? It was a serious change. I mean, people are now going to die, for example. Everybody's going to die. That's a consequence of what happened with Adam. But we don't say that because you're going to die, well, God has committed evil, because that would be suffering for what Adam did. I mean, is he going to say that? Is he going to say that he should live forever physically, because if he dies physically, well, then he's being punished for Adam's sin? All right? So you start with something like that and don't even deal with the spiritual issues quite yet. You start with something like that and see if he can get a hold of that just from a physical, practical point of view. And then you might be able to comfortably move into the other issues and say, that was a big change so that we would physically die like this. That was not part of the original design. That was a change in the design. Well, an additional change in the design was that God was no longer within humanity. His spirit was no longer within the people. And so it was withdrawn from Adam and Eve, and any children that they would give birth to, they would not have the spirit. So are the children now, do the children have a claim before God? Are they going to be able to go before God? Could we go before God right now and say, now God, I was born, therefore you have to have your Holy Spirit in me. Because if you don't, then you're holding Adam's sin against me. So give me your spirit. All right? But he would say, no, you don't understand. There was a whole new creation. You're part of a new creative design that happened afterwards. Adam suffered for his sin. Eve suffered for her sin. And that was it. The children that were born from Adam and Eve from that point, from that day forward, they were born according to the new design, according to the changes that were made in creation. All right? So being born spiritually dead is not you experiencing the punishment of Adam. It's just the way the design is. Okay? Now, if you're concerned about your sins being held against you or former sins being held against you, well, just wait a little while. You'll commit a sin, and we can hold that one against you. We don't have to worry about that if that kind of topic comes up. But be prepared. If he was to watch this and listen to this kind of an explanation, is not necessarily going to make a difference. All right, a better question to ask. All right, if you want to talk. A better question to ask is, okay, sir, tell me, how would your life change if you believed what I believed? What would happen in your life? All right, what would happen in your job? What would happen in your family? And you could just stop there, okay? What would happen in your life? How would your life change if you believed what I believe? And the answer will be that the changes that this person will experience in their life are just too much. All right? It's just not worth it from their point of view to believe what you believe, because the cost in their own personal life is just too high. All right? And that's not a good reason. I don't think it's a good reason at all. If there is truth, you believe the truth no matter what the cost, especially when you're talking about eternity. You identify the truth, you believe the truth, and you embrace whatever cost someone else may put on you. All right? But does he have the guts? Does he have the gut? Does he have it in him to accept the loss of all the relationships that he has, potentially losing his work? Does he have it in him to let go of his whole life if this is true? That's a better question to ask. And if he says yes, well, remember, you don't have to believe it. What's important is, does he believe it? Okay? Does he really believe that? Will his life be a reflection of that he says he believes? And give him some time to work through that, all right? And I think that's a better question to ask in these kinds of scenarios. How would your life change? Especially for someone who is a Muslim, who is a part of Islam. All right, next question here. If Jesus is the only shepherd, why does Peter say all of this? Okay, I think this might relate to, I think I talked about this last week. Sorry. I do a lot, and that Sunday morning message is just only a small part of all that I do. Okay, so I can't remember. It was a week ago. A lot's happened since then. It's a lot has happened since then, so I'm not sure if I spoke about this last week or week before or maybe somewhere else. It's tough for me to keep track of everything. Every day is like this. I really have to press pretty hard sometimes. So if Jesus is the only shepherd, why does Peter say all of this? He speaks about the shepherds. If you're a shepherd of the flock, you find this to be a little bit troubling. All right. Well, look, yes, Jesus is the only true shepherd. Okay, but I'm not going to complain if people want to use that word when describing other people. I'm not going to complain. However, I would like people to acknowledge that there still is only one true shepherd. Okay, now the way that I can do that is if you keep reading in what Peter says, he kind of gives a description of what he means, of what he wants to say. Okay, so we've got somebody who's considered to be a shepherd, all right? We don't have to be afraid of that word. Let's look at what he wants to mean by that, and the definition could very well give a description of a relationship that is different between the people and Jesus compared to this other person who's considered to be a shepherd of the people in a sense, all right? The elders this is 1 Peter chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. The elders who are among you, I exhort. So he's speaking about the elders who are among you. And there will always be elders within a fellowship, a community of believers. The elders who are among you, I who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed, shepherd the flock of God. All right, now he's saying shepherd the flock of God in the sense that, all right, you elders. Now, some translations probably use shepherd there in verse 1. Maybe that's the issue, is that I'm looking at a different translation. All right. And if that's the case, then, all right, we may have a subtle translational discussion or a subtle translational argument that the intent was not to use the word shepherd in the same way that we would use it for Jesus, but to use that word in the context of someone just simply being an elder of the church. But regardless of the word, keep reading and go for, what does this mean? All right, what does this mean? Moving into verse 2, shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly. All right, so we've got the intent. Don't be of service to others because you feel like you have to. Okay, do so if you're willing to. And if you're not, don't. All right, so there's a good option. Jesus doesn't have that option. Okay? Jesus doesn't. He just is. He's the shepherd, all right? So, he can't just not be that anymore. What is he going to do? Is he going to send you a text message, like a notification or something? Say, no, excuse me, David. I just want you to know that I've decided I am not your shepherd anymore. All right? I'm just not willing to do that with you. With you, these others, fine, but no. All right? That's not gonna happen. All right? But Peter says so. He says, look, if you're willing, then do so. If you're not, then fine. Not for dishonest gain, but eagerly. Okay, now here's a good one, right? Not for dishonest gain. You wouldn't have to say that to Jesus. Now, Jesus, if you're the shepherd, don't do it for your own dishonest gain. Don't do that. For manipulation and for taking advantage of people. Using your authority inappropriately. No, don't do. We don't have to talk to Jesus about that. But these other elders and overseers and people we call shepherds, we have to tell them that sometimes, I suppose. All right. So you go into the description and you can see that there is a distinctive difference between who Peter is referring to, in this context, and how we would relate to Jesus. All right. So with that, I would be comfortable. Using that word as long as we have, just that understanding, the understanding that this word is being applied, but the package of that word, when applied to a person, includes, now, don't be dishonest, and don't do it if you don't want to. And what else do we got here? Nor as being lords over those entrusted to you. Well, that's a tough one, because boy, I know an abundance of shepherds, especially those who call themselves that, who really believe that if you walk into their building, well, they have total authority over every aspect of your life. They believe that, so they would have a problem with what Peter just said, being lords over those who were being entrusted to you. But be examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd, well, there you go, you got chief shepherd, right, referring to Jesus, appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away. Likewise, you younger people, and he goes on from there. All right, so that's my answer to this kind of a question. You just need to keep reading. Okay, just need to keep reading, keep going. Don't let something like this stall you out too quickly. All right, let's see. I was sharing with a friend, and he said, if all sin has been dealt with and forgiven, peace is declared, good news is proclaimed, then what does John 20, chapter 23 mean? All right, now the first thing I want to say is that when it comes to the topic of complete forgiveness, that the sin issue between us and God is over. When it comes to that topic, there are a lot of verses. Okay, I mean, there are a lot of verses, and they are quite clear. They are very direct. They're to the point, that shows that the sin issue between man and God ended. Okay? And so what people will do to try to avoid this issue or try to defend themselves is they'll go look for something obscure. They'll go look for an obscure verse. Okay? And there are a lot of pastors, priests, this is something that a lot of priests use. A lot of people go for the obscure ones. They want the obscure verses. They want to emphasize those because it's the obscure ones that can be bent, a little bit, that have enough flexibility that they can put their interpretation in there as long as nobody pays attention to the other verses that are totally obvious. So make sure that in your conversation that there is an understanding that there's a difference between the obvious verses and then the other verses that are a little bit obscure. And this is one of them, all right? You keep reading. If you forgive, this is John chapter 20, verse 23. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained. Now, that's a little obscure. It is, because it gives the impression that Jesus is saying that these disciples now have the authority to decide who is going to be forgiven and who isn't. All right? I mean, there are a lot of priests who like this. They get into this, and they take this obscure verse, and they use it in that manner. And there are a lot of people who like it. They want to believe it too. They go for that, and they say, yeah, I'm glad that I have this priest in my life who has this authority given to them by who knows who, that they'll give me forgiveness. You know? Well, if God is the only one who grants forgiveness, then why would they have the power of forgiveness? All right? That's the kind of conversation that you're going to end up with. All right? That's what you're going to end up with. Now, I read this a little bit differently. The way, I'll just tell you, I feel comfortable with this. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to believe what I believe. You wrestle with this however you'd like. But when I read this, it tells me that forgiveness was executed. Jesus died for the sins of the world. The sin issue is over. He goes to his disciples and he says, listen, this sin issue is over. Go and tell people that they are forgiven. If you do, they might believe it, and they can embrace the forgiveness that they have. And if you don't, how are they going to know? They might very well be forgiven, but they're going to live their whole lives thinking that they're not. And then there's more. It doesn't stop here. What about being made into a new creation? What about being born again? Right? What about being resurrected by the indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit? It's forgiveness that makes this possible. Forgiveness is just the step before salvation. So there's more to go on. This is kind of obscure. There's more to be dealt with. You can't just deal with this whole subject with this one verse. If you try, well, then it can mean anything. You can come up with anything at that point. So this is how I read it. If we don't tell others about the forgiveness that they have, well, then, it will be as if they have not been forgiven. And so their sins will be retained. And, it may not be in the mind of God, but it definitely will be in theirs. That the sin is still held against them is effectively what that means. In their own minds, okay, in their own beliefs. God isn't, but they think he is, and so that's the consequence. Now, something important about this, though, is to see just how important it is for us to tell people that the sin issue is over. It really is important. To me, this is an admonition that is given to everyone. Go and tell people that the sin issue is over. If you don't, it can be just the same as they're not being forgiven. It can be equivalent, in a sense. And so go do that. Now listen, I understand that most of you don't have a lot of people in your life. And there's not very many people who will listen to you talk about the fact that the sin issue is over. Maybe you're a part of a church and you're starting to run out of people there to talk with about this, that you found that most people just don't want to believe it. I understand, all right? Before I was doing the ministry full time, Before that, how many people do you think I was able to talk with? How many? Just take a guess. Well, I'm going to tell you in a second. But I'm asking the question just to think about it for a moment. How many people do you think I was able to reach out to? I can tell you, it's not too difficult. On average, it's about one a month. Okay, about 12 people per year. That's what I did. And I felt really good about it. I thought that was good. I thought that was great. And if you go out there and you reach 12 people a year, and I'm reaching 12 people a year, hey, that's 24 people. That's pretty good. And then there's a lot of other people you talk with who just totally reject what you're saying, but maybe one out of so many, and there is something good that comes out of that. There may come a time where I just can't do the ministry anymore. I just can't do it. And you're not going to hear this from me. You're not going to hear me show up and say, I need donations or I'm out. All right? I'm not going to do that because I already know that even if people respond, it'll be quite short-lived. And there's other things too. Sometimes people ask me, Aaron, why is it that you're not asking for donations? Well, because I get tired of being rejected. Right? And you might think, well, then be a salesman, No, I'm serious. I sometimes I will, like in a scenario like this, I'll say, look, I live only by donations. That's how I survive. That's how I meet my obligations. That's how I take care of my children. Oh yeah, and what happens if one day I have a heart attack or a stroke? How am I going to continue to survive after that? Oh, well, I'm not receiving anywhere near enough donations to be able to even consider what would happen there. That's a big lesson I learned from Bob George. Bob George had his stroke, and he was gone. Nobody helped him out. Nobody, hardly. I'm sure there were a few, but he was in real trouble. He spent the rest of his life, and he barely survived on Social Security. That's the lesson of Bob George that I got on this particular topic. I barely made it. I don't even have Social Security. I don't have it. I don't have access to it. I haven't been paying into it. I don't even get that. What about the church that I pastored? Wonderful people. And they really did help me out a lot in order to do the work that I was doing. And then we couldn't meet because Jared said that we don't have his permission to be able to meet anymore. And I couldn't do that because I'm dealing with all kinds of other issues that I can't put myself or my kids at risk to be confronted with these other issues. They're over now. But what I do, I started doing, and I can't physically go and meet with those folks on Sunday mornings, but I can get this camera going. I can do this, and I can speak here, and I can answer questions still by email or by phone. I'm still just as available as it was before. In fact, it didn't take very long before I was communicating to somewhere between 20 and 30 times the number of people, not 10 times, right? 20 or somewhere between 20 and 30 times the number of people, and that consumes time and effort and work than I was on Sunday mornings before. And then what happened to the donations? What happened there? It was less than 10%, real fast. I'm very thankful. A number of the people did continue to support me through about halfway into the summer. That was great. And I still got, I think, 2 or 3 that are still helping me out now and then. But, everybody's gone. I'm on my own. I wish I could have done something different, but folks, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I couldn't. So I did this instead, and people think that, well, he's got 20 to 30 times more people watching him, so I guess he's getting more in donations. Oh no. Now it's a lot less. It is. And the reason why is because everybody thinks it's somebody else is helping me. So, if I ask, will you help me? If I do it in a broadcast sense, what are you going to think? You're going to think, oh, everybody else who's watching is going to help him. And then you know what happens? Nobody does. I learned this years ago with the radio ministry, with Living God Ministries. Every time I'd ask people to help, nobody. None. Nobody would help. All right? So, why ask? Why ask? Unless I would like to provide you with some form of amusement. Is that what I want? You like that? You like the amusement? All right, look, listen, I'm saying all of this in order to make the point, okay? I'm making the point that those who have been donating to the work that I'm doing, which is a very, very small micro fraction of the people who actually benefit from the work that I'm doing, very, very small micro fraction. I mean, I need to use exponents in order to describe. It's like 10 to the minus 4. Okay, it might be 10 to the minus 5. I don't even want to go look, all right, because I don't need that kind of depressing expression. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's reached 10 to the minus 5 in terms of how many people are actually helping me do the work that I'm doing. But I'm saying all of this in order to make the point, all right, to make the point that you probably have noticed, if you haven't noticed by now, you need to get out a little bit more often. You've probably noticed that there's pretty much no one who is really communicating the gospel in the way that I'm communicating it. All right? I mean, there are a couple of people that are kind of close. I know you could give me their names. I'll say, yeah, they're kind of close, kind of. All right? But no, there's pretty much no one in the larger public realm. All right? I mean, there may be groups of 50 here and there. That that's fantastic. I don't want to take any of that away. All right, but just go through the listings and the radio stations as an example, and go through and see, well, who really does teach that. And I can pick out one person right now. You probably would say, well, he is, and I would say, well, maybe. Okay, because it's not just that he says, but there's a whole lot of other things that he says, some of which can contradict it. All right, so not necessarily. So if I'm doing this, and I'm pretty much close to the only one who's doing this, if you can reach 12 people a year. Or why don't you double it and make it to 24 people a year that you actually are able to get them to understand and embrace the complete forgiveness of sins? That's great. By all means, do that. Okay? But look, I have been able to structure and build, and with the help of a lot of people, the radio ministry for one. The video is working out pretty well too. Those are two separate things though. I've been able to do a lot so that, there are a lot of people who are recognizing that the sin issue is over, as would be intended to say here in John chapter 20, verse 23. I'm doing this, okay? And, I could do a lot more, and it wouldn't take any more work, all right? When I founded Living God Ministries, I defined an architecture for complete elasticity. Okay? It can expand and contract according to whatever anybody gives. Easily. I don't know, I think I'm on 14 radio stations right now. I think it's 14 radio stations that we're on. And several of these have multiple signals, like 2 signals, 3 signals. One of them has 4 signals, 4 different frequencies that they're on, AM, FM, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of that as well. If we were to double our radio stations, okay, which could easily happen when I'm talking about the number of people who are listening versus those who are donating. If it's 10 to the minus 4, all right. If we go to 10 to the minus 3, all right. If we could go from 10 to the minus 4 to 10 to the minus 3, that many donors. Folks, I could take probably every spot that's open right now on every radio station in the country. All right, I'm serious, And then we could have, more people can know that they are forgiven. Wouldn't this be good? All right, so what happens? What happens when things change? What happens when things change? I'm sure that God will raise up somebody else, but the whole world is changing in a really big way. It's changing in a really big way in the sense that, consider China, for example. They got 1 billion more people than we have over here. Do you see any Chinese ministries broadcasting out here or reaching people out here about the complete forgiveness of sins? Or much of anything? No. What about the people in India? Well, a few. Yeah, a few here and there. But my point is that, look, the day is coming when this isn't going to work anymore. The day is coming when, we're not going to have the ability to do the magnitude of what we're doing right now. This is the time to do what we are doing right now. Don't wait for another 5 years or 10 years to start supporting the work that I'm doing. Do it now. Now. This is it right now. All right. So that's what I could say about verse 23 is that, yes, we have some influence here. And if we don't participate and let people know that the sin issue is over, it could be as if their sins are being retained. It's as if their sins are still being held against them. The consequence is still the same. All right, so that's how I think of verse 23 in John chapter 20. All right. Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I didn't expect to go that long. I had another question that rolled in here through email. I'll save it till next week. It might as well because it's a question about current events, and a lot can happen between now and 2 weeks from now. So let's just for humor, I'll just go ahead and I'll put this. That's good. 2 weeks from now, I think the world is going to be a lot different, and so we'll look at this question. We could have a little. I could think about how the question would be answered one way today, and how it would be answered differently 2 weeks from now. In terms of what the real relevance would be. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop here about 3 minutes early, but that's what I got. Okay, so folks, if you got any questions you'd like to send me, please do so. I did go through a lot of older ones this week, and I just deleted them. Don't feel shy about sending me a question a second time. Don't feel shy about that, but don't demand that I answer it, and don't ask why I'm not answering it. Sometimes, I don't have time. Don't send me, a whole long novels about whatever. Don't give me a speech. That's something I noticed with Bob George's radio program when he was doing a call-in, was that most people were calling in not because they really had a question, but they were calling in because they wanted to give a testimony or a bragamony, or because they just wanted people, they wanted Bob to provide them with an audience. Let me say it that way. That's a better way to understand that. They were calling in because they wanted Bob to provide them with an audience. All right. So don't write to me asking for me to be your audience. All right. Now, if you just need to do that, I don't want to say I'm not going to complain, or I'm just asking to try to keep that a little bit reduced. But if you've got a question in there, can you put the question up front? Don't put it at the end, all right? Put it up front and let me know what it's really, what you really think I might be able to help you with, all right? And then put the rest of it right afterwards so that I can divide. I need to divide the two sometimes, because in many cases you might have a really good question, but I'll delete your email, or I won't look at it. I'll be skimming through it, and I'll just let it go, because again, unfortunately, I don't have the resources to be able to put in as much time as I would like, or as you would like, all right? But I'm doing what I can with what I've got, and I feel good about doing as much as I'm doing, okay? So I'll stop there. Thank you for being here with me this evening, or for those of you who watch us later, I'll get over it, but I'm here, and I will be back in the morning, tomorrow morning, to talk about the Gospel of John, and then 2 weeks from now I'll do another Q&A. Thanks.